Hello and welcome back to Lorcan Villain. My name is Baker and today we're taking a look at 5 decks to try out built around the Queen disguised Peddler. There's so many interesting new cards coming in the upcoming set Rise of the Floodborn, and of all of them, this is one of the cards that is one of the most exciting to me. I'm not sure if it's going to be a top meta deck and go the distance. Even if not, I think this could be a really fun archetype to try out. This video, there's no actual gameplay. It's just going to be 5 decks that I've built, all with different colours. So I've got all the different combinations with Emerald to go with this Queen. And yeah, the decks that I've built, and they can basically act as a starting point if you're interested in trying out this Queen yourself. Again, it could be that she doesn't do as well as I'm hoping, and it's just a bit of fun. But if that's the case, I'm happy with that. But even if she does end up being good, the list that I've made here probably won't be completely accurate. But again, they're meant to be a starting point, and I'll talk you through all my decisions. But after every color combination, I'll also show you a screen of options for cards that you could try, even if they're not in the deck version that I've built. But let's take a look at our Queen. 3 cost uninkable, the Queen disguised Peddler with a 2/3 stat line, Storyborn Villain Queen, and the ability A Perfect Disguise. Exert. Choose and discard a character card. Gain lore equal to the discarded character's lore. So, technically speaking, you could do this. The most lore we have on any character is 4. There are a couple of characters that can get to 5, but that's not how this works. It has to be the given lore on the card. So we have a few things that have 4 lore. So technically, if you do this 5 times, you win the game. Now, my thought trail is you might not always get to do it 5 times. You might not even get to do 1 with each Queen. But if we assume that you do get to do at least 1 with each Queen, that's 16 lore. If you're only discarding things that have 4 lore on them. And then you just need to find the other lore at some point during the rest of that game, which I think could be quite reasonable, and like you should have a good expectation of being able to do that. A couple of the combinations, depending on what ink combination we've got, have cards that can work really well with the Queen, so we can recycle with Amber. Ruby has ways to re-ready, to protect, and all of the inks have a degree of synergy to work with this Queen and protect this Queen. So if we're playing this Queen, we're obviously playing Emerald. So I'm going to start off by showing you the basic Emerald shell from which I've then built all of the decks that you're about to see. And then after that, we'll look at other options from Emerald that you could include if you were so inclined. So this is basically the skeleton from which all the decks are built. Not all of these cards are featured in all of them, and I'll tell you straight away that the stuff that is related to discard, so King John and Hypnotize, they only come up in the Amber Emerald deck. There's also Flynn Rider there, but he pops up in a couple more of the decks. But yeah, just to let you know straight away that you don't always see the discard stuff in all of these decks that you're about to see, but you could put them in if you wanted to. We'll talk through each one as we get to them. We've got Flynn Rider here as a nice 1-drop. Now, obviously, for our Emerald, it's this Flynn Rider over here, his own biggest fan, which is one of our main targets for basically her apples. She's throwing apples and getting lore from them. So Flynn Rider is the only guaranteed apple that we have because it's the only other card in Emerald that has 4 lore on it. There are 4 lore characters in Ruby and Steel, which obviously we'll get to, but if you're playing Emerald with a color that isn't one of those 2, then Flynn Rider is your only apple, so it's very important that we have him. We don't want to be putting him on the field because we want to be discarding him through the Queen's effect. However, if we really, really need to, then we can. Like, this Flynn Rider could also be, if you're playing it for Ruby, it could be Mickey, or anything that's basically a 1-cost, 1/3 stat line. But we might as well use the Flynn because there might be a world where we can shift into the Flynn and maybe they've got no hand and we're able to win that way, or maybe we just desperately need to take something out with Evasive. I would rather have the access to it than not. But yeah, generally speaking, we don't want to be putting down this Flynn Rider because we want to be using it to throw away as an apple. The reason I think it's good to have a 1/3 instead of a 2/2 is because playing Emerald, one of the cards you'll see in every single deck is Ring the Bell, which is one of Emerald's cheapest removal cards. Now, depending on what other ink we're playing with, there is access to other removal, but this is one of our guaranteed ones in Emerald. That being the case, we want to be able to get damage on the board, and Flynn Rider has more of an ability to put damage on multiple things. He's more likely to survive a hit and then potentially be able to get damage on another character that goes down as well. So you're just spreading that damage around so that you have Ring the Bell active more often than not. We can also go straight to look at the Cheshire Cat, who we're using in pretty much all of these builds here. The new shifted one from the Shadows, who can shift 5 on top of one of your other Cheshire Cats. Has Evasive, which can become useful. 5/6 stat line is really good and inkable. And then the Wicked Smile, exert to banish a damaged chosen character. So with this being quite a core of this emerald deck that we're building, whatever other colour that we're working with, we want to be able to quite consistently be able to get damage round. So that's why I've gone with Flynn Rider. But it could be, as time goes on, if Queen base decks end up being quite good, it might be that you need to swap to a 2/2 just because it's more important to hit a certain number against things that are prevalent in the meta. Sorry, that was my phone going off. Don't check yours. Because we're playing this Cheshire Cat, it makes all the sense to play one of the baby ones. And this is where the count of how many of each of these you play, or at least in my decks, differs quite a lot. And we'll talk more about why I've gone with a certain count as we look at each deck in question. But obviously, strengths and weaknesses, this Cheshire Cat is cheaper, and not only will it allow you to get some damage on the board to set live our Wicked Smile and I'll Ring the Bell, but just having 3 strength might just be enough to take things out anyway. And because it's good for your curve, because we always want to put down this queen on turn 3 as long as we have an apple to drop. That's our preference. So if you can already have this on the board, then you can potentially wipe away a target of your opponent that would otherwise have immediately then taken out the queen as soon as she exerts. You're not always going to be able to prevent that, but we kind of accept that all of our queens are going to get banished. We just want, in a perfect world, to at least have gotten her effect off. Even if, like, again, in a perfect world, like with Ruby, we're able to re-ready, and we've got bounce down here that you'll see a lot because it's one of our ways of protecting our queen and reusing our queen and not leaving her exposed. But generally, we accept that there's going to be times where we use the ability and next turn they're going to be able to challenge into her. There's certain combinations where we're able to play bodyguarders and things like that, but we accept that. But as long as we get at least 1 apple drop off with each queen, then I'm happy with that, because again, that gets us to 16, and then we can all being well find our 4 other lore elsewhere, even if it's just questing early game before you even put this queen down. So yeah, there's advantages to running this cat. It works well in your curve, it helps to set up damage and take out threats quite early. But again, the advantage of this cat, a disadvantage not putting any damage on the board, but he is questing for a little bit more, and he can be just a removal. Again, this Cheshire Cat can be a removal through challenging, but again, this one, because of the lose something ability, I think more often than not it's better to run the 2 cost one, but there are a couple in at least one of these decks there's more of the 3 cost, but I think that's in one of the decks where we just have too many 2 costs that we're running anyway, 2 drops. We're also running this other Flynn Rider. If you are running the discard package, then it makes more sense to do this, but it is also just a really good 2-drop who can A, get some damage on the board, and B, get some of that early questing. Like I said, if all of our queens are only dropping 1 apple, then we need to find 4 lore from elsewhere, and you could potentially get all of that off of 1 Flynn Rider. So I think they're important to play, but again, in a couple of the decks they're at a lower count. If you do choose to play the hand disruption stuff, then obviously you're going to want to play Prince John, which does also help you with replenishing your own hand. Like I said, there's only one of these decks that you're going to see full lists for that actually runs this discard package, but it could be that you want to run the discard package in one that I've not used it in, and that's absolutely fine. Obviously, no other queens here. Donald Duck I think is fantastic, even though it's giving them cards. We don't really care. Again, obviously we're not thrilled about giving them extra cards and extra options and ways of taking out the queen, but we're doing our best to protect her anyway. And again, we're hopefully putting them on a clock anyway, as long as we're not really struggling to find our queens and our apples. But again, also, it's just some consistent card draw. We're not playing Hypnotize in all of the decks, only the ones to do with hand disruption. So it is the only card on this board that can draw us cards, but obviously depending on what other colour there's other card draw. But yeah, I really like Donald Duck, and quite a lot of the time it is your preferred 4-drop. We've talked about Flynn and Cheshire Cat and Bounce. Hypnotize in only for discard. We talked about Ring the Bell. Pack Tactics is an interesting one that comes up in 1 or 2 of these lists. Definitely Steel, I think it's most worth playing with, because again, it can just come out of nowhere. If you even if you only get off 3 apples because lots of stuff really went wrong, that's 12 lore. And if you can find the other 4 lore anyway through basic questing with Flynn or with Cheshire Cat or whatever, I think that's quite realistic to be able to do that. That's 16. Then all it takes is for them to overextend to 4 creatures, which you've managed to damage all, whether or not because you're playing with steel and you've got stuff like Grab Your Swords or all these other chip damage cards, or you've just done a good job of spreading damage around the board with a lot of these low-cost things, and then just out of nowhere, pack Tactics for 3 or 4 lore, and you can just win. It doesn't work in all of the decks, but it's definitely something that's worth considering. And yeah, can just win you the game completely out of nowhere. And Mother Knows Best is one also to consider. Most of my decks are using Bounce instead because it's cheaper, and again it allows you to, as well as protecting your queen, disrupt their field a little bit. Obviously, the good thing about Mother Knows Best is you can choose either. You can either protect your own queen by picking her up or return something to your opponent's hand that you know is about to threaten your queen. Also, you can sing Mother Knows Best, which is the advantage over Bounce, but we're not too fussed about that. I would rather have Bounce more often than not. So this is our shell for all the decks that you're about to see. Again, I'm not saying that all the decks have all of these cards, but these are the cards from Emerald that we are using. But now let's have a look through the rest of Emerald and talk about some options that you could go for if you wanted to. So I'll say straight away, some of you may be wondering why there's no Kuzco in there. Is probably the main one that's jumping out of people. Kuzco is an option that you could put in, and I wouldn't say you're wrong for doing that. But as we go through the decks, I'll explain why I feel like if you end up putting down Kuzco, you're kind of going down a different line of play to what you really want to be doing with this specific build of dropping apples. Don't get me wrong, it can still be good because, you know, it can spread some damage and remove some, like, because again, sometimes players will go into it with a small thing with a big thing but doesn't take out Kuzco, and then with a smaller thing, so the smaller thing's getting banished but you still get some damage on the other thing, so it's live for Ring the Bell and stuff like that. There are worlds where you can play Kuzco and it's not a bad thing, but in my builds I've decided not to. But again, completely up to your preference. You could also go down a road of thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to play some extra things that have 3 lore, and I'm going to start throwing them away with the queen as well. In my opinion, then you are just not getting forward in the race quickly enough. If you're doing it with 2 and 3 lore things, then you are potentially leaving your queen vulnerable or doing something and then using resources to protect her for math that it doesn't really work well, and you've got to fight. You've got to be able to do it more often with Queen, or be able to recycle her more. Or I think it becomes harder to hit that 20 number in the end. You will still do it sometimes, and some of you may think, no, I think it's worth playing a couple of 3 drops, and that's absolutely fine if you want to do that and you discard them with the Queen. It's an option as well, like if you just can't find a 4 drop. Although in my opinion, really, if you just haven't found the 4 drop, you don't put the Queen down yet. You just try and control the board as well as you can, but you might not always have that option. So if you want to play 3 drops, fair enough, but none of mine are playing 3 drops. But that's just a generalization. But let's look through everything. Again, like I said, if you want to play, if it works out that we need to be playing a 2/2 for a 1 drop, just as a math fixer, then we got the Duke of Weaselton right here. And then again, if we really need a math fixer to deal with a specific threat, like Mega Rod was used quite commonly to take out Simba and then deal with the Lilo, if you're against Amber. So if that becomes something we need to be able to respond to, just to make sure that they're not winning that race against us, then Mega Rod can find a way in. Enchantress is interesting just because when it's being challenged, she's a 3/1, so she's probably taking out something that challenges into her, and she can be early aggressive. But again, we're running Flynn in most of our decks, so it doesn't really suit our curve the best. This Gaston, if you decide that you want to run the hand discard package, like I said, the only one version of my decks here that are running it is the Amber deck. But if you decide you want to run that one or put the discard package in any of them, I'm still not sure I would massively advise Gaston. I think, cool, you're discarding cards, but like that doesn't always mean that they're going to have no cards in their hand during your turn. They will sometimes, but if you really want to, you can play the Gaston and this Bell, which benefit from your opponent having an empty hand. Evasive is something that could become an issue. Again, they could just win the race. Like they could not be challenging you, and you're not challenging them. You're both just trying to. They're questing to game and you're trying to throw apples to game, and they could just be winning that race. So you might decide that you want a couple of evasive options sometimes for questing and like helping yourself pace that little bit more, but more often than not just for dealing with the opponent's evasive. That being the case, you might want to go with Peter Pan. If the evasive options that are most popular are only 3 willpower, then Peter Pan's right here. If it turns out that you need to be able to hit 4, then you can go with Ratigan down here. You could also try Ray, who can hit 3 but can also be a target. Like again, if you're thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind having Ray's not bad for something that is a 3 law, so can be thrown with the Queen or can just be put onto the field and apply pressure, but can also be an answer to opposing evasive. But if opposing evasive is regularly 4 willpower or more, then he's not going to be enough, and you're probably going to have to switch to Ratigan. Daisy, like I said, if you're running the discard stuff, then you might want to run Daisy and Lucifer over here. Hans, if you want to run more 3 Law Pit things. Tinkerbell fits into that evasive, as we were talking about. This Bell here, which I think is really, really high roll. But if you really want to lean into the hand discard stuff, then by all means run this Bell. I've talked about Kuzco and Lucifer. Mad Hatter, kind of the same as what I've said about Kuzco. He's not really your preference, and he's too easily removed. You don't get a guaranteed effect off of him. You could also go down a road with Pete. A couple of ink combinations have some interesting action cards, and if you decide you'd like to lean into those actions, then maybe you want to go Pete, who can just be something to get rid of threats on the board that you think are going to worry your Queen. So it's something you could think about. Tiana's a good one again if you do want to run a couple of 3 Law Pit characters to throw with the Queen, but also Tiana hitting for 5 is really good, takes out Mickey and all sorts of things. There's also this beast, Relentless. I would only advise running this beast if you're going to run with steel, although the steel emerald deck that I'm about to show you doesn't run this beast, but you could build a version that also ran this beast and go a lot more all in, and then you've got this as something that's questing like mad and re-readying and questing as well as your Queen dropping apples. I haven't included this beast in any of my builds, but it's something you could do. If you want some more disruption, then you could try the Genie, but again, then you're raising your uninkable count. John Silver and Mother Gothel, I don't really think fit the theme of what we're trying to do here, but if you wanted to use them, they're proven as good cards. If you do decide to lean into an action package to boost Pete and maybe other cards from other colours, then maybe you want to try a one-off Lady Tremaine. If you feel like it's really important to hit 6, maybe try Little John. Again, if you're going with actions or you just want some extra math fixing, then we have Improvise. Vicious Betrayal obviously works really well with Pete because you immediately give him 8 strength so that his ability pops off. Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo is best paired, I think, even though I'm not running it in mine, is Emerald Amethyst, because you can cheat the Cheshire Cat into an Elsa, which is quite interesting, although I don't think I ended up keeping it, but it is something you could do. And just really interesting here, not really interesting, but kind of funny, if you do decide that you really like an action-based version of this deck with lots of the hand disruption stuff and, you know, maybe some Pete and improvises and hypnotizes, maybe try out Dr. Facilier's cards. Lantern was proven good. Maybe this is the format for Dr. Facilier's cards. We shall see. But yeah, these are some options of some different Emerald cards that you could slide in if you wanted to. So let's start taking a look at the deck lists. I lied. We're going to look at threats to our PEDDLER Queen first, because obviously that's a lot of the basis under which I've done my deck building. So we're basically looking at ways that the Queen can be removed before she gets a chance to use her ability. Again, we accept that sometimes that we will exert her for ability and then she will just get challenged next turn. We'll try and stop that if we can with bodyguarders or re-readying, but we accept that it's going to happen. As long as we get to throw at least one apple with every Queen, we're a lot happier. What we really don't like is her being removed before she's even had a chance to do so. So some of these cards need to be used together to produce the result of getting rid of the Queen, but we need to be aware of what all those cards are. So our Queen has 3 willpower. So we've got this Queen of Hearts here who does damage to a character if there's already damage on that character. Robin Hood exerts to deal damage. Elsa, if they go first, they get if they've got a 2-drop and then they put her down Elsa, and then we put down our queen, they could potentially freeze to exert it, and then their 2-drop or their 1-drop could have 3 strength to take our queen out, so we need to watch out for that. I have no idea why Mickey Mouse is on here. You are not a threat. The genie obviously can just take her out. That's a bit later. Just take her back to your hand. That's a little bit later in the game, but we need to be aware of it. Tinkerbell, obviously, it only does 1 in chip damage, but if used in tandem with other chip cards, could spell doom. Aladdin would be really annoying just because we're not really like, none of these decks are massive in terms of like dealing with big we can deal with early game threats, but the longer the game goes on, like, we're not going to win board control overall. We just want to be able to, like, win the game before they do. So too many Aladdin hits can really annoy us, just by denying us that sweet lore that we've got off those sweet apples. So we need to be careful of Aladdin. Obviously, Hades can instant banish. Cinderella can potentially challenge things that are ready, but I'm not expecting to see a lot of Cinderella. Elsa obviously really slows us down, so we're not able to continue using our ability. Maleficent obviously destroys. Stampede, if there's already damage on something, then it does 2. Never saw play in season 1, but who knows, maybe it becomes important too in season 2. Fire the cannons obviously does 2 damage. They can bounce us back, they can pick a fight, they can launch by turn 3. Smash is the worst case scenario. Falling down the rabbit hole, in fact, falling down the rabbit hole in Hades, I should have mentioned this, are 2 of the worst case scenarios because it puts it in the inkwell. So a couple of these decks can't recycle the queen anyway, so it's kind of sus. But yeah, these really bother us. Because if we lose our queens, we are really going to struggle. So we really don't want to fall down a rabbit hole or find out the downside to this that Hades speaks of. Dragon's Fire is his straight removal. Teeth and Ambitions for some chip. Storm Rage on and Grab Your Swords are all chip. Fishbone Quill. Oh, that's why Mickey's here. Just because if they go first, then technically... If they go first, their turn 3, they play Fishbone or Mickey, then you on your turn 3 put down the Queen Peddler, and then technically on their turn 4 they have 5 ink to play with, so they just have more options of cards that they could use to stop us, like Dragon's Fire, etc. That's why I put Mickey on here. Obviously Be Prepared is always something to be worried about, but we don't extend that much, so we're not too worried. Yeah, and Whole New World, obviously moored for, like, if we're throwing away our queens, that can be quite annoying, especially if we're not playing with Recycle. Smash is our Everest. This is the most common card that is going to come up that could just immediately remove us. So, depending on how popular Smash remains, it could spell doom for this deck in particular. The Emerald Sapphire version that you're going to see does have some ward access, but yeah, Smash is probably the biggest concern I have for this deck working. But those are all the threats. Now, let's look at some deck lists. Let's start off by taking a look at my Red Apples build. So, one of the main advantages of playing with Ruby is our ability to re-ready through LeFou and Fan the Flames, so that we could literally do it multiple times in a turn if we want to, and slash or it just offers as additional protection for the queen, so that at least she can't be challenged into. Dinner Bell is our primary card draw. We do obviously also have Donald, which is very good. But yeah, Dinner Bell is our primary card draw. Maui is a perfect partner for this because Maui can come down turn 5 and hopefully deal with a threat on the board. And then as long as they can't immediately take him out in their turn, then turn 6, as long as you'd already played Dinner Bell on your turn 4, then you can immediately draw off of him. Even if you don't sequence it that way, he's just a good target for Dinner Bell. We've also got 2 Mother Gothel over here that can be a good target for it. She also acts as just another early card that we can put down on our curve to deal with opposing threats that we think are going to bother the queen. We've gone with only 1 of this Cheshire Cat and 3 of this one in this particular deck, just because we've got a couple of other 2-drops that we want to play. You wouldn't really ever want to play this LeFou like on your second turn, and to be honest, a lot of the time you might not even want to play it down. You would have to put down this Mother Gothel on turn 2 if you wanted to be able to draw, or to turn 2 or 3, if you wanted to be able to play Dinner Bell turn 4 and then turn 5 immediately pay the 2. To be fair, you could just play her down on turn 5 and then pay the 2, so you could do it that way. So if you wanted to mess with this count of Cheshire Cat, that sounds reasonable to me. We've got Obviously, this Brave Little Tailor Mickey, which is another one of the really good things about playing with rubies, you get access to another 4 lore pip character. I still think having the full 4 of the Emerald Flynn is important because you want to be able to see them. But yeah, we have an extra one that, like, if we really need to, we can ink it. I'd still, like, again, you don't really want to, but you can, so it's like, that's something to bear in mind. But yeah, it just gives us another target from which to throw an apple to gain some lore, so that's really good. Bounce to protect us again, and Shield of Virtue for some extra re-readying, and then be prepared for, obviously, you know, if it's going to get to a point where they're going to start extending against you to just try and catch up and win as quickly as they can and just overwhelm you, and that's when Be Prepared comes into play. Let's look at some of the other ruby cards that you could play in this build. So first off, we've got Felicia, who just for a 1-drop with 3 strength, you can't ignore. I think there's a really good chance that ends up making its way into my main build there. And again, depending on how the meta forms out, it may just be, yeah, we need Felicia because we need to be able to hit a 3, hit for 3, and we can put that down turn 1 and be ready for it. So fantastic. You could also say the same for Gaston. If we need to be able to hit 4, he can slide his way in. Mini, if you want to play instead of Flynn Rider for whatever reason. Oh, that would be the reason. You could lean into some of the action stuff with playing with Ruby. Like I said, you could play Pete from Emerald, and we've got stuff like What Did You Call Me over here, which may just be a math fixer, but it's also an action. But yeah, if you wanted to play this mini, again, I wouldn't really recommend it because you have to play a second action to get the addition to lore. I don't really think she's worth it, to be honest, but if that floats your boat, then by all means you could play this mini, and then you could play this mini instead of the Flynn, so by all means. You could also be really cheeky and play your own Aladdin package. You normally want to play the Queen down as your turn 3 anyway, although sometimes you can put her down later, especially if you don't have an apple to drop. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with sometimes turn 4 or 5 putting down this Aladdin just to deny them a bit of lore if they're trying to race you, and then you can shift into this Aladdin and not only get a nice little spike yourself, but slow them down and remove a threat from the board. So maybe a nice 3-2 line of Aladdin sounds kind of reasonable. Like I said earlier, if you want some evasive options, you could just go with Fidget if 3 is a good enough number to hit. You may also want to go with Goofy or Tigger instead. Again, the good thing about this Goofy is obviously that he's got more lore, so if you're someone that's deciding that you do want to be discarding other things with the Queen that aren't just 4 lore pips, then you could discard Goofies and Tiggers if you wanted to. You could also go down this path with Rhea, because obviously the shifted one has the ability that whenever she challenges a damage character, then she takes no damage. So if you have been keeping up that pattern of trying to spread damage so that your Ring the Bells are live, then maybe you get a lot of value out of this Rhea. It's not something I'd recommend, but it's something you could try. Peter Pan, if we find that we just need to be able to rush a character on turn 3, to respond to the opponent, then that's there as an option. Shirkar is an option. We're not doing a lot of challenging, but if you decide to go with a build that's a little bit more aggressive, like you're running Aladdin's, maybe you are running maybe you're running Pete and Vicious Betrayal. Maybe you decide to also run this Tigger, because they're just low cost, but they can get to quite a high strength number, and you want to make that your way to defend the Queen, just have some nice cheap beat sticks around her. Maybe then you want to put in the Shirkan, so you're getting some more advantage off of that. There's also the Mulan here with Rush. If turn 4 isn't too late, then you could go with this one instead to hit for 4 as opposed to Peter Pan's 3. The Mari is nice just because it's basically a cheaper Dragon's Fire, but you have to wait a turn. So yeah, why not? Get that down on the field, and then as soon as your opponent plays something that you know is going to be a threat to the Queen, they're going to challenge into it, they put down the Cinderella that can challenge ready characters or something, this Namari can deal with it. Again, you can just play Dragon's Fire if you want to. Ratigan probably doesn't make it, but he does re-ready characters, so I had to put him on this slide. And who knows, based on how the meta works out, maybe exerting an opposing character with 3 strength or more is pretty good for whatever reason. I doubt it, but it's an option. Stitch is here again, like I said, if you want to run a few characters that have the 3 lore, so you have some more potential apples to throw with the Queen, then by all means. This Scar is quite interesting because again, they're going to start to kind of flood their field, and they won't always, especially if you're playing red and they're going to be predicting Be Prepared. But this is still a way of responding to them, like getting down 2 or 3 characters and starting to, like, even if they might just be trying to race you to game. And as long as the characters aren't evasive, then Scar could just deal with a couple of them, so that's pretty cool. There's also this Scar, which is worth mentioning, because when you play him, he re-readies character 3 cost or less. So if you quest with if you use the Queen's ability to drop an apple and then put down Scar, he will also re-ready her. Maleficent, I wouldn't advise. You're not always getting to 9 ink really, but if you want, you can try it out. Go the Distance is something you might want to consider, because it's another card that readies a chosen character and lets you draw, but they have to be damaged. And I just think we already have Fan the Flames and LeFou, and I'm not even running the full 4 LeFou in my particular build. I think what I've got's enough, but if you want to, you can go with Go the Distance. Teeth and Ambitions, again, if we want to be able to just respond to certain threats. You can fly if you don't want to run evasive characters, but you want to be able to make one of your guys evasive just to deal with the opponent, by all means. And the Most Diabolical Scheme is something that you could play, like it works with, you could drop an apple with the Queen, exert her, and then you can play this Most Diabolical Scheme, which takes her out. But if you knew that she was about to get banished by an opposing threat anyway, sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's just going to be a -1, but definitely worth mentioning. So those are some options that you could try it with Ruby. Next up, taking a look at some purple apples. So one of the good things about playing with Amethyst is you get access to brooms, so that we can recycle not only our queens, but our Flynn Riders. We don't have a secondary character with 4 lore pips, so we are all in on Flynn Rider. But again, with brooms, and even the brooms can be recycled, we should be fine. So there's the chance that this deck works. We've got 4 1-line of 1/3 1-drops with 4 Flynn and 1 Olaf. I made this decision more, because of the bounce stuff. So again, we want to be able to get some chip damage on things for the cat and ring the bell. But we're also playing bounce stuff, and we would really like to be able to get this Madam Mim down turn 2 if it's an option. So just having an extra option to be able to return to your hand, that's more what's motivating that. Madam Mim is fantastic because she can help bounce the Queen back to our hand, or we can bounce anything back to our hand that has a nice come into play ability. Our Maleficents and anything you see that has a come into play ability, we can reuse it. But again, perhaps most importantly, we can protect the Queen. I think that's why we're not running bounce in this deck, because we've already got loads of ways to return cards to our hand. Brooms have explained. Yzma, we're running a 2 count of just the ability is not insignificant, because sometimes we need to dig for an apple or for a queen or just for certain pieces. So sometimes you'll quest with Yzma as well, but sometimes you won't, because you would rather just shift into the Scary Beyond All Reason Yzma and then quest with her. But yeah, this obviously Scary Beyond All Reason is so versatile. You can just say goodbye to a threat on the board, even if they're drawing 2 cards. Sometimes you don't care, you just need to remove the threat. But you can return your own Queen to your deck. We can return our own Brooms to our deck. And we've got some, like, sometimes just return the 1 cost just so we draw 2 cards. Yzma's really versatile, so I really like that. We don't have any 3-drop Cheshire Cats in here because we've got so many other. We've got Maleficent, we've got Arthur, which isn't your preferred turn 3, but we've got Madam Mim if we need the Russia, so we've just gone all in on the 2-drops. But again, you could adapt that if you wanted to. Only 1 Arthur in here. He's a little bit slow, and he's not our preferred turn 3 play. Because if you put him down turn 3, even if your thought is, okay, I'm going to put him down turn 3, and then turn 4, I'll put down my Queen, you're leaving them around too long to just be removed. My preference really is like turns 5 onwards. You get to a point where you've got a Queen on the board who isn't threatened by anything because you've dealt with the opposing board, and then you put down Arthur so you know that you're threatening the next turn to be able to drop an apple with Queen and then return the Queen back to your hand with Arthur, and then potentially even put the Queen down again so that she's readied and safe. Other than from hard removal or chip cards for the next turn. So Arthur definitely is very good, but I think just the 1 count in here. We've got 3 of this Madam Mim, which is something else that can bounce the Queen back to our hand, and like 4/3 is a really nice stat line to just deal with opposing threats. And you'll see later on we've got this Shift Mim, so it's an extra target for that. 4 Maleficent, I think these are probably still worth playing. You've got you see that and the Friends on the Other Side package. We just want to be drawing cards. We've got a 1/1 line of Elsa and Dr. Facilier, and they are mostly here to work in tandem with this Madam Mim and this 1-count Fairy Godmother. So obviously this Madam Mim over here, we can shift onto any of our other Mims, and she has the Gruesome and Grim ability, where you just immediately play a 4-cost from your hand. It has Rush and is banished at the end of the turn. So this can be just a really nice panic response to it. Like, as long as you've got a Madam Mim on board, then by turn 3 or 4, or like at any point you need to, really, you can just immediately go, oh, okay, I'll quickly shove Dr. Facilier or Elsa onto the board, whether it's because I need to deal with an evasive threat and this has got 4/2, or it's because I need to deal with a threat and she will challenge for 6. And if you're really lucky and you've been able to do this at a point where you've also already got Fairy Godmother on the field and she's already quested, again, this is probably a few turns, like, this is probably past turn 6, 7, 8, if you've managed to get Fairy Godmother down and then wait for her to be dry so that you can quest her and be able to get the Madam Mim off. Yeah, it's probably a little bit later in the game, but if you can get these two down and then rush Elsa or Dr. Facilier, and then it returns back to your hand because of Fairy Godmother, so that's kind of great. You could also do it with Merlin just to get some card draw. We've got the one-off Mickey Mouse in here, which is really cool. We can also give rush to our brooms. So we've already got the Mickey Mouse down. We could use Madam Mim to put down the broom, and it's already got rush, and then challenge into something, and obviously it'll return to our hand because of the Mickey Mouse. So it won't get banished due to the Mim effect, so that's quite interesting. Yeah, that's pretty much... I'm Stuck's pretty cool, because right from early in the game, like... with their early cost characters, they might be like, okay, well, I'm going to put down a 2-drop which has 3 strength, so I'm going to easily deal with your queen next turn. But I'm still going to quest because you won't challenge me because it would kill you, because it would you'd lose your queen. And then we just play I'm stuck, and then they're stuck. They are stuck like that, and then they have to extend more than they thought. Yeah, I really like the free copies of I'm Stuck. It could just be really annoying and just slow them down. Whether or not it will work, I don't know. I don't know if any of these are going to work. There will definitely need to be changes to all of these lists. But I do wonder how close I am. But yeah, I'm a kind of a believer in I'm Stuck. But let's look at some other Amethyst options. So one of the first temptations with Amethyst and this particular type of deck that you might have already been thinking about is Dr. Facilier. You could do it. You could run a 4/3 Dr. Facilier line, and that seems okay. But I just think it's a little bit slow. I think it's more reliable to be able to use our bounce cards that we've got, Madam Mim stuff, to be able to return the Queen to our hand. And we've got the one-off Fairy Godmother that we just talked about that gives the ability to return back to your hand. So I think that's kind of enough. We have better 2-drops, and it's just another uninkable, and it's turn 5 soonest. And you can bounce stuff from turn 3, 4. So that's why I've not gone with it. But if you wanted, you could go with a Dr. Facilier package. Hey's just interesting just because it will return to your hand after being banished. So you can take out threats and still keep up hand control and keep having things to put down and dealing with threats. You could run a Pinocchio package if you wanted to. This makes quite good for the curve, that you could put this Pinocchio down turn 2 and then turn 3. Again, it's just extra questing for you, or just something that you could even discard as an apple if you are willing to discard apples that have less than 4 lore. If you want to play this Pinocchio package, it opens you up to... Where's it one gone? Where's he gone? There he is. Yeah, you can play the Shift one, which obviously has a bounce ability to return anything that's 3 cost or lower, so annoy the opponent or return your queen and keep her safe. You could also play a 1 or 2 of Jiminy Cricket as well if you wanted to with Pinocchio. Probably wouldn't advise it. Maybe a one-off. But just for some extra card draw. Rafiki, if you feel like you really like, again, we talked about Peter Pan earlier, it may just be important to be able to do this, so there. You may want to lean more into the Fairy Godmother and have higher counts, and if you're going to do that, I would run it with this Fairy Godmother, even though it's also a 3 cost and we want our PEDDLER Queen to be our 3-drop. I think the other one is a 5 cost, so I don't think it's worth it. So yeah, if you want to lean more into the Fairy Godmother, I'd go with this. You could play this Kuzco as well, like similar to what we talked about Hey, but he draws you the card instead of returning to your hand. Merlin, if you want to have a little bit more top of the deck control to help you dig for your queens and for your apples. There's also this Yzma to shift onto if you want to, but I prefer the other. If you want to go down a road where you are going to have some cards that you can just discard with the queen as like not as big big apples, you could use Jafar if you want to, or if you're just expecting to have a big hand with Amethyst, as it sometimes does. Maybe you want to try Jafar. Your evasive option, you could go with Jetsam. If 3 isn't a big enough number to hit, then you won't be able to, and you'd probably have to get your evasive option from like Ratigan or something. But he also, Jetsam also has 3 willpower, so it may be that you feel like you can get a 2 for 1 off of this. Merlin is a big consideration and is one that I could, like, it's probably the one on this list that I can see the most finding its way back into my main build, because it is very good, so one to consider. I'm not that keen on this Merlin, really. I don't think it's going to be very good. It is, even in a full-on bounce deck, like, you're not always wanting to do multiple bounces in a turn, and if you are, then you're not doing it because it's preferable. You're doing it just to add some lore here, and I think that's you wasting resources. So I'm not a fan of this Merlin, to be honest. You could play the Queen if you wanted to as a 5-drop, just an extra way to draw cards, and maybe that becomes the distraction of the opponent's hard removal cards. Again, if like, they should be removing your queens, well, your PEDDLER queens, but if they're going for these, and that's less removal that they have for your PEDDLER queens, you could play this Madam Mim if you want to as a one-off for some extra bounce. I wouldn't recommend it. You could also run an Ursa or 2 of these, again, especially because you've got bounce and you can recycle the ability. So that's pretty cool. That a one-off of this could easily make its way into my main build. If you are going to run this Merlin, you might as well run this Befuddle. Legend of the Sword of the Stone is just here because it might become a math fixer. It may be that we need to be able to hit a certain number earlier on in the game, and this is our way of doing it, so one to keep an eye on. We've got the Gruesome and Grim as a song, if you decide that you would rather be singing this with Maleficent on turn 4 or something like that, instead of playing the Shifted Maleficent, that you could lean into this. We've got the Croquet Mallet here, purely because it's you could play the Pocket Watch if you wanted an extra access to Rush. Because the only access to Rush that we have is our Madam Mim, the one that will give Rush to the character that she summons. You could also play the Watch if you wanted to, or if you just want a cheaper way of being able to do it, but you don't expect to be able to do it all the time, you could go with the one-off Croquet Mallet, although if you're not, like, you'd probably just run a one-off Pocket Watch because it's also inkable, but this is an option. You could put in a Magic Mirror if you wanted to. I wouldn't go more than a one-off. Perplexing Signposts, it's probably my 3rd pick for most likely to find its way into my main deck, just because it's bounce that is really cheap bounce. You can just immediately put this down and use the ability, whether that's for your queen. Yeah, it's just a really easy way to return your queen to your hand. Again, you could just play the card bounce instead, but you know, this is just an extra option. Ursa's Cauldron's here as well if you want. We talked about Yzma earlier, the 2-cost one that can help you manipulate the top of your deck a little bit more to dig for certain pieces. If you want to, you could run this. Again, there's going to be more item removal in this next format, but 1 of each, or 2 Ursa's Cauldron, or 2, I'd probably go 1 Magic Mirror and 1 Cauldron, or 2 Cauldrons. I mean, you can recycle them with your brooms, but again, we want to be recycling our queens and our apples. You could go Sorcerer's Spellbook if you want that extra pressure in the lore race. And yeah, that's pretty much everything for our Amethist options. So let's take a look at another one. We'll take a look at Saphire next. I think this is probably the weakest of combinations, but something that it does allow us is access to Ward. When we talked earlier about how Smash is kind of our nemesis. And yeah, with this, if we can get the Aurora down turn 2, then there's worlds where we do the shift to Aurora, we play the shift to Aurora turn 3 before we put down the queen, just to make sure that she's nice and protected. It does set us back a turn, but it's not a terrible decision. We also get access to Sardine Can, which is really great. Because obviously we're exerting the queen to use the ability. Obviously they can still challenge into her, but it's one less. If we can give her ward, it does lower the amount of options that they have to remove the queen, so that's always good. We've only gone with 2 Donald in this particular list, but we are running a Basil package just for the card draw. Nothing more. You see, we're not actually running any ramp, and that's because it doesn't fit our curve really, really well. We've got 2 drops that we want to play too badly, and 3 drops that we want to play too badly. I don't like the idea, again, especially in this build where Flynn is our only apple and we have no recycle. If we hit our apple or our queen off of these random RNG Mickeys and 1 jumps ahead, that doesn't sound good to me. You could just do it anyway and go, well, you know, like YOLO, like I'm like across a tournament of 9 rounds. That's not going to happen all the time. But yeah, not something that I'm keen on straight away. But yeah, we're running a Basil package. They could like, and the good thing is as well, you can shift this Basil onto this Basil, and then you can shift and this Basil onto this Basil and just keep drawing cards. Obviously, you'd have to wait till the next turn so you've got enough ink, but it's something you can do. We've leaned into items slightly here. We're only running 2 items. We've got the sardine can, which obviously have use, but then just the Porpsicle. But it's so easy to recycle this Porpsicle because of Nick Wilde over here. We've also got Flavisham. Because this just makes a nice little 3-card combo. If you get Porpsicle down on turn 1, and then for turn 4, we put down Flavisham, just playing him, he immediately removes the Porpsicle, so we draw 2 cards. Turn 5, if we can play Nick Wilde, bring back the Porpsicle, play the Porpsicle, that's our 5 ink, and then quest with Flavisham, remove the Porpsicle, and we're drawing again. So you can get some nice loops off here quite easily. Also, the 1 copy of Falling Down the Rabbit Hole just as an additional bit of removal for us. And again, we do have a fair few low-cost things like that. We don't mind throwing like a couple of these into the inkwell. We don't mind losing a Flynn or an Aurora or a Basil or a Cheshire Cat. Again, we want to have this live as a potential shift as much as possible. But there are options. But again, it does give us some safer ramp. Yeah, to be honest, that is literally our only ramp card in this entire deck. So that's kind of funny. Only 2 Let It Go, because we've got the 4 Ring the Bell. Again, we should be able to get some damage on things a lot of the time with all these like low-cost characters. And I would rather not be filling their inkwell if I don't need to. But I have gone with at least the 2 copies, but you could play with those counts if you wanted to. But let's look at some other options for Saphire. So you could lean even more into the item stuff. You could play Maurice's Workshop, Scepter of Arendelle, Magic Golden Flower. This also may be in niche situations, like maybe they only did a little bit of chip on the Queen, and you're able to remove that chip. But again, this is the one combination where we have Ward, so probably doesn't come up a whole lot, but again, just as an extra item. We've got 4 dozen eggs here, which can give resist to, and maybe that helps you to survive some hits with the Queen. I've started at the bottom this time, I don't know why. Again, we talked about One Job Ahead and Mickey. I don't like the idea of it, but you could do it. Same with Winnie the Pooh. But again, Winnie the Pooh is it's like Fishbone Quill. You get to choose it from your hand. I don't think it suits your curve very well, but you could play this Winnie the Pooh if you wanted to. Launch here, if you're going to lean into the items, it's away from turn 3 to be able to just remove a threat on the board, and maybe that gives your Queen a little bit more lenience. Nothing to Hide could be interesting in this, just to scout your opponent's hand and see if it's safe to do what you want to do, because again, we're so zoned in on one strategy that we do sometimes kind of need, like, sometimes you just need to go for it, even if you know your opponent may have an answer for it, but sometimes it might be optimal depending on how much card control you've got to be able to scout out the opponent first and like maybe bait something else before you risk the Queen. We don't have many 1-drops in this particular build, so you could go with Develop Your Brain if you wanted to. You could go Hades if you want that extra removal. You could go Robin Hood if you want the extra evasive access and just for some more card draw. There's this Gaston here. If you do choose to go down a road of, oh, I'm okay with discarding apples that only have 3 lore pips, then you could play this Gaston as an apple, but also as you can just put him on the board and do a dig of 3 to find your Queen or whatever you want to. So he's an option. Maleficent's also an option here for that same thing, just because of the 3 lore pips, same as Prince Charming and the Caterpillar. Cruella de Vil, if you decide to play the 2-cost one as an evasive answer, maybe you want to play a 1 of, probably not, but it's an option. Cogsworth's not a terrible decision, because Ward on himself is good, and again, giving all your other guys resist 1 sounds good, just as some extra protection for your Queen against challenges. You could play Sisu if from turn 4 you want to be able to just dig for your apples. It's an option. Mrs. Judson, I'm so proud of you, Mrs. Judson. You probably shouldn't play her, but if you find yourself with like 3 Floodborns in your build, maybe show Mrs. Judson some love. We have James over here if you want another ramp card in your deck, which isn't random. You could play Grandma Tala up here, but we've got so many 2-drops in our main build that I opted not to. but you could still play her and just play her on a later turn than turn 2. But James is also there as an option and a bit more aggressive in the questing. Judy Hopps, you can play it if you want to, more as just like, again, you can remove your own Porpoise of Will, but if you want to remove opposing items, then that's your answer. Philatites, if it just becomes too important to be able to hit a certain number, either 3 or him giving support to a 1-drop, then he might find his way in, and that's pretty much everything. So yeah, that's some extra options if you are going to build with Saphire. Let's look at something else. Taking a look at Steel Apples now. So straight away, one of the good things about running Steel Apples is we run Mouse Armor, because this allows us some extra protection against Smash if we can get this down turn 2. And it will just be good in general throughout the game to just be able to constantly be able to like have resist 1 on the queen and make them need to dig that little bit deeper if they want to actually banish her in a challenge. So it will come up for that reason, but yeah, more than anything, it's just so that you have more protection against turn 3 Smash. We've only got the 2 Flynn Rider in here because we've got the 4 Captain Hook, which, because of the Challenger 2, like, this is just an easier way of dealing with early game threats, so that you can like control the early board a little better around your queen. We can also play this shifted Captain Hook here, which is an extra way to sing A Whole New World, which you see that we're playing in this particular build, just so that we can cycle through our apples and just keep replenishing a nice new hand. Again, you could play a version without A Whole New World if you wanted to. The Huntsman is quite a respectable 2-drop because of the 2 lore pips. It's still going to do 1 damage to set up Ring the Bell and Wicked Smile, but just being able to dig through our deck but draw a card and discard a card, so that's an option. We've got the Prince here as a 2-off as a bodyguarder for our queen, and why wouldn't you run a bodyguarder? This could also be Hercules if you wanted, and then you could also play a one of the new Hercules, the shift one, just as like a response to deal with threats. And in a minute when we look at our steel options, you'll see that. But if you're not going to run the big shift Hercules, then I would run this Prince instead of the Bodyguard Prince, just because he also has resist 1. We run a Tinkerbell package in this particular deck so that we can be a little bit more aggressive in return. To like, if they start to like open up and really extend because they can see where we're just trying to discard with the queen, then we could potentially get a really nice big play off of Tinkerbell. And that's the reason you still see the 1-pack tactics in here, because I just think you could just win the game out of nowhere if they extend too hard. If they extend too hard, 1 Tink and 1-pack tactics, you wins. That's kind of cool. Only 3 Donald in here because we do have the Whole New World. We've got 1 copy of this beast purely because it would be silly not to play, because just this shield another ability is just so good. So if you're able to, again, you can't put him down straight away, so you've got to protect your queen earlier in the game, but then as you get past turn 6, he's going to be a fantastic way to take the attention away from the queen. So at least one of these, and too many of those I think would be wrong. Maybe you could go to 2, but yeah, I think 1 is probably the right call straight off the back. Obviously, we've got the Goofy in here, which is our 4 lore character to be an apple, bounce, and yeah, all stuff that we've already talked about. So yeah, this is my current build for steel apples, but let's look at some other steel options. So as I said, you could run this Hercules package for the brand new Divine Hero. If you are going to run this Divine Hero, you could, to be honest, like, there's arguments to running either or of these Hercules, because obviously this one also has Bodyguard, but this one you can just like get down a bit sooner on your curve. So yeah, you could play this Hercules turn 2, play your queen turn 3, and then turn 4 you can shift into this Hercules. So there's an argument to playing either or, so I wouldn't blame you. There's this Cinderella Knight in Training, which is similar to the Huntsman that we looked at. You could run that instead, and then if you were going to run that, you could also run this Cinderella, which I don't think is going to be useful as often as you think for the Singing Sword, because you're probably not running enough songs. It might come up, but the Resist 2 would be cool, but mostly because it's another way to sing a whole new world for free on turn 5. So not as soon as Captain Hook, but it is a way to sing whole new world for free on turn 5. We've got this Jafar here as an evasive option if you want an evasive option, and then it does also give you the option to run the Dreadnought version, and you can put this down next to your Queen and just have this be taking out the threats that are on the board, and you're drawing cards all the while with the Now Where Were We ability, so that's something you might want to consider. It's Prince Eric here. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to. If you do lean into the beast from Emerald that we talked about earlier, the one that re-readies whenever you do damage, then you most likely want to play things like this Robin Hood, or we have this cheap Bogo here if you've got enough other Floodborn characters that you're playing. Probably not this one. You probably just settle for Robin Hood, and then the chip cards like Fire the Cannons and Smash. You might just want to play Smash just to remove opposing threats. Obviously grab your swords. If you do lean into songs, you've got Let the Storm Rage On for some chip damage. We've got Kronk here, which obviously is kind of the same ability as Tink without the sprinkle at the sprinkle on enter play, but he also has resist 1, so maybe that floats your boat. You can play Li Shang if you want to have evasive options without running evasive options, just so you can turn anything evasive. Maybe you want to lean more into the Green Beast, as I just said, and if you are going to do that, then maybe you just go all in on the beast in general, because there's this beast that does damage, and you want to do damage to keep re-readying the Emerald Beast. And if you're going to be running some of these, you might want to run a couple of the shifted ones. So beast all round. There's obviously also this one that removes items, but you're probably more than likely just going to play Benja because he has the exact same ability and he's cheaper. Lawrence is one to come up if we find out that we really need to be able to hit 4 by turn 4. So that's an option. Or Lilo you could use for that. We've got this Magic Broom here just to give resist to your Queen. Probably doesn't come up very often, but something that I thought was worth putting on the slide. And Beast Mirror over here is an option. Again, we're more in on the whole new world, and we do have Donald as well, but there's no, if you really like Beast Mirror, you could play it as well or instead. So yeah, these are some other options for your steel apples. And finally, we have some golden apples. This is the deck where we have put in some of the hand disruption package. So obviously you've got Flynn Rider as standard that can discard cards if they challenge him. So we've got the 3 copies of Prince John here so that we can be drawing off of this hand disruption. And then we've got 3 copies of Hypnotize and 4 copies of You Have Forgotten Me. You could also run Daisy if you wanted to. You could also run Lucifer if you wanted to. And there's Sudden Chill. There are other options. Those are the ones that I've gone with because I think they're probably the most consistent. Like this lets you draw a card as well. You Have Forgotten Me as 2 cards, and if you're with Prince John, then yeah, you're just drawing. Like, I think these are the best ones to play. So we are running the hand disruption package. We've got the 3 copies of our 1-drop Flynn Rider. We've got 3 Simbas in here as a bodyguarder. And you see later on we also have Maximus as a bodyguarder. Which is also interesting because it lays into our World's Greatest Criminal Mind. Which we are running 3 of as just an extra way to remove threats. But yeah, with this support we can get this online more often than not. 4 copies of Hades so that we can recycle our apples. Again, there's no Amber for Lore Pip character. But we've got 4 Hades. And you could choose to play part of your world if you wanted to. You also see later on in the list we're running 1 copy of the new Snow White Well-Wisher, who will recycle characters every time she quests. I think this is the right count. If you were going to change anything, you could go to 3 Hades and that's probably fine. I probably wouldn't go more than 1 of these Snow Whites. I mean, you could, maybe that's right, but my instinct tells me this is probably the right counts. Just 3 copies of Donald in here because we've also got 3 Rapunzel here. I know I gave everyone a hard time about less than 4 Rapunzel in Season 1. I do feel differently about Season 2. I think there are worlds where, just because there's so many more card options, where just 3 is maybe fine, probably fine, and maybe even 2 at times. That's pretty much everything. For be a guest here as well to search for our apples or for our queen or whatever we want to remove. So yeah, this is my version of Amber Emerald apples, but let's show you some other Amber options. So quite a lot to talk about here. You could go for the Lilos so that you have that as a 1-drop and you have the Simbas and she's questing big and she'll still get some chip damage on things to ring the bell online. So that's an option. You could go for a Rockstar Stitch package if you wanted to, especially if it does become more important to play a 1-cost 2/2 as opposed to a 1-cost 1/3. Then you could use Stitch as your 1-drop 2/2 and have the Rockstar as well if you feel you have enough characters that are 2 or less to have adoring fans online. You could also play the Queen if you wanted as your 1-drop 2/2, and that would also open you up to be able to play the Shifted Queen to manipulate strength from turn 2 onwards. So that's quite powerful. That's an option for you. You could also go LeFou if you want to just go like really like questing heavy and be racing. Rapunzel here, and obviously there's the shifted one. You could go for an engine like this if you wanted to draw cards off of removing damage. If you were going to do that, we have things like Dinglehopper, and obviously the main Rapunzel that we're running on our main deck also removes damage. You could go for a Lantern build. That's something interesting you could try. Again, if you're wanting to play just more characters that you're happy to discard for high lore, then you've got the Mickey here. You've also got this Mickey, which you could put on the field to reduce the cost of playing cards. This dock's interesting just because it lowers cost of things. You could lean into Christopher Robin. You're not likely to often have multiple characters out. Some builds might, especially if you go for a Rockstar build. So maybe then you do want to try out Christopher Robin. I've put Eudora here just because she's so bulky. There's probably a use for her. You could go with Piglet instead of if you want to lean more into Rapunzel. I say Piglet because I think Piglet's a better replacement for Mr. Smee, because you can still easily set up the Rapunzel play, plus Piglet is questing for more, so that would be my recommendation. You could also lean a lot more into songs, just overall. You could play yourself an aerial package. I meant to say when we were talking about the Rapunzel stuff for removing damage, if you were going to do that, then you could play this Snow White who removes damage, and then if you're going to play this Snow White, you're probably warranted playing a second version of the shifted one, because it's just going to be easier to get her online. But yeah, you could lean into the songs. You could run yourself an aerial package. Again, part of your world is already good just for recycling, but you could find that. You could find Hakuna Matata, which is another card that can work with this shifted Rapunzel to draw you cards when you remove damage. You've got Zero the Hero here, Painting the Roses Red. We're already running the Be Our Guest. If you do go with a song package, then you could consider Sleepy's Flute or Ursula's Shell Necklace, depending on if you're more interested in the extra lore or the extra card draw. If you are running the song package, you could also run the new Mulan, who allows you to look at the top card of the deck, and if it's a song, play it for free. If you're going to do that, then you're probably also playing this Mulan, who has support. And if you do play that Mulan, then that plus the Maximus that we're running probably gives us enough support cards to warrant at least one copy of Dragon's Gem. I need to breathe. I've done so much talking. And yeah, there's Rockstar Stitch down here as well if you do see yourself extending a little bit more in characters and just for some extra card draw. So yeah, that's everything for my extra options for if you're playing with Amber. And that is all of my thoughts about the Queen. Like I said, even if she does end up being quite good, whatever the best combination is, I won't have got the list perfect, but I'd be very interested to see how close I am to the most optimal way of playing the Queen. Feel free to try out any of these lists. They'll be linked down below, and please do comment and let me know how you got on, or give me your feedback and what you like. Feel free to give me different ideas in the comments and say, oh, I would go with this option. Let's talk about it. Let's theory craft it. And if you take any of these lists away and try them and you end up having certain results, come back and let me know. I will certainly be trying them out myself soon. And at some point after the official release, you'll start seeing gameplay videos, and we're absolutely going to try out at least one of these Queen decks. And it will develop and get better and better. And who knows, maybe it could be a tournament winning list one day. And that's it from me. If you're brand new to the channel, please subscribe for all Lorcana content. Hit the like button to show your support, and we'll see you soon.